What is the moon to us? A silver disk in the night sky, a mirror of tides, dreams, and time. The first world we reached, and the first we left. But what if we returned? Not just for a footprint or a flag, but to stay? This is not a story of conquest. It is not a prediction or prophecy. It is a possibility woven from science, imagination, and the long rhythm of time. You are about to embark on a journey that spans 2,000 years. From the launch pads of today to the light of the 41st century. From dust and steel to myth and memory. From temporary outposts to transcendence. This film is divided into 20 chapters, each one representing a single century in humanity's evolving relationship with the moon. Each chapter explores the technologies, cultures, conflicts, and philosophies that might shape that era. Each is illustrated through expressive, dreamlike visuals and narrated as a chronicle of what could be. Some moments will feel familiar. Others will feel utterly alien. All are rooted in the real potential of human innovation and imagination. This is not just about building cities on the moon. It is about what the moon builds in us. When we dare to dream, to stay, and to evolve beyond what we thought was possible. So, take a breath, look up, and let's begin. Chapter 1, 2025 to 2125, the century of first contact with the lunar frontier. In the opening century of lunar ambition, from 2025 to 2125, humanity embarks on its first sustained efforts to establish a presence beyond Earth. This period is marked by foundational exploration, infrastructure prototyping, and critical discoveries in lunar science. Spacefaring nations and private companies like NASA, CNSA, ESA, and SpaceX begin regular robotic missions to the moon's surface, focusing on polar regions where permanently shadowed craters hold valuable water ice. The late 2020s see the first crewed missions of the Artemis program, culminating in the establishment of Artemis Base Camp near the lunar South Pole. Through the 2030s and 2040s, modular, semi-permanent habitats begin to emerge, supported by in-situ resource utilization, ISRU, technology that extracts oxygen from regolith and ice. Energy generation is primarily solar-based, with experiments in compact nuclear reactors underway. AI-guided robotics play a central role in building infrastructure and conducting scientific exploration. However, this era is also fraught with challenges: radiation exposure, lunar dust mitigation, psychological stress in confined habitats, and logistical bottlenecks for Earth-supplied materials. The development of reusable heavy-lift vehicles and the maturation of autonomous supply chains help bridge this gap by the late 21st century. International cooperation deepens, with lunar missions increasingly coordinated under joint treaties and consortiums. By 2125, the moon hosts multiple semi-permanent habitats, each housing rotating crews of scientists, engineers, and automated systems. These early outposts are not yet cities, but they represent the architectural and technological testbeds from which future lunar civilizations will grow. The foundation has been laid, scientific data harvested, essential life support systems validated, and the human will to persist in a new world firmly demonstrated. Chapter 2, 2125 to 2225, the century of permanent habitation and lunar governance. The second century of lunar development, spanning 2125 to 2225, marks the transition from temporary human presence to sustained habitation and socio-political integration of the moon into Earth's broader sphere of influence. By the early 2130s, advances in autonomous 3D printing and regolith-based construction techniques allow for the fabrication of durable, radiation-shielded structures. These enable habitats to evolve from modular shells into sprawling subsurface complexes, each capable of supporting dozens of long-term inhabitants. Closed-loop life support systems, combining bioregenerative agriculture and synthetic biology, drastically reduce Earth dependence. With compact fusion reactors emerging as viable energy sources by the mid-22nd century, lunar settlements gain consistent power regardless of solar cycles. Economic activity shifts from scientific exploration to pilot-scale industrial operations, mining helium-3, refining rare earth elements, and manufacturing high-grade materials in microgravity foundries. Lunar orbit becomes densely populated with satellite infrastructure, facilitating Earth-Moon communication, navigation, and early-stage space traffic management. Politically, this century sees the rise of lunar charters, legal frameworks jointly negotiated by multinational coalitions to manage sovereignty, commercial rights, and resource ethics. Tensions occasionally flare between Earth-based interests and lunar stakeholders, prompting the creation of semi-autonomous lunar councils to administer local governance. Cultural identity begins to shift as the first multi-generational families arrive by century's end, raising children in 1/6 gravity under dome-covered crater cities. The moon ceases to be a distant outpost. It becomes an off-world extension of humanity, with its own rhythms, routines, and aspirations. Educational programs emerge to train lunar-born citizens in terramechanical engineering, low-gravity physiology, and interplanetary law. While still dependent on Earth for select resources and diplomacy, the moon enters a new phase of self-sufficiency, laying the administrative and infrastructural groundwork for the great expansions to come. Chapter 3, 2225 to 2325, the century of industrial expansion and cultural emergence. Between 2225 and 2325, the moon undergoes a profound transformation from a network of self-sufficient habitats into a planetary-scale industrial and cultural hub. This century witnesses the acceleration of lunar-based manufacturing, driven by advanced nanofabrication, atomic layer assembly, and quantum-controlled precision systems that exploit the moon's unique vacuum and low-gravity conditions. He-3 extraction becomes economically viable, fueling fusion reactors across the Earth-Moon system and sparking geopolitical realignments around lunar resource ownership. Vast subterranean mining operations emerge beneath stabilized crater settlements, accompanied by maglev transport tunnels and pressurized transit hubs connecting colonies across latitudes. With Earth's population surpassing 12 billion, the moon increasingly supports overflow through targeted immigration programs, aided by artificial wombs and low-gravity neonatal care technologies that reduce biological risk for lunar-born children. Social dynamics shift accordingly. Lunar dialects and artistic movements blossom, influenced by altered circadian rhythms, low-gravity expression, and digital consciousness culture. Lunar education systems pivot towards space systems design, gravitic biology, and interplanetary anthropology, producing a new intellectual elite tailored for the cislunar economy. Politically, independent lunar councils coalesce into the first unified governance model, the Lunar Compact, asserting conditional autonomy while maintaining diplomatic and economic ties to Earth. Cultural independence becomes a matter of identity as much as policy, with lunar citizens beginning to view themselves not as Earth expatriates, but as natives of a distinct world. Inter-settlement AI arbitration systems help mediate disputes, while digital voting networks allow near-instantaneous civic participation across vast underground municipalities. Though still reliant on Earth for high-order AI cores and select raw materials, The moon now thrives as a nexus of post-Earth civilization, industrialized, decentralized, and increasingly aware of its pivotal role in humanity's multi-planetary destiny. Chapter 4, 2325 to 2425, The Century of Terraforming Initiatives and Biosphere Synthesis. From 2325 to 2425, lunar civilization turns its gaze inward, initiating an era of ecological engineering and biosphere expansion designed to push the boundaries of human comfort and sustainability in an alien environment. With nearly 1 million permanent residents spread across interconnected subterranean and dome-covered cities, the pressure to create livable, psychologically enriching environments intensifies. Lunar scientists begin experimenting with closed-loop synthetic ecosystems, modular, self-regulating biospheres that integrate engineered plant life, genetically adapted microbial colonies, and smart climate control systems. These biodomes simulate Earth-like microclimates, offering forested parks, freshwater lakes, and even artificial weather systems within pressurized enclosures. Atmospheric retention technologies, though incapable of full-scale terraforming due to the moon's lack of magnetosphere and gravity, are deployed on smaller scales using gravitic field generators to manage air density in enclosed valleys. Advances in gravitational manipulation, still in nascent stages, allow for localized enhancement of effective gravity, particularly in medical and athletic facilities to support musculoskeletal health. Culturally, the moon becomes a symbol of engineered nature, a living demonstration of humanity's ability to recreate complex ecosystems from scratch. Artistic movements evolve around the blending of natural and artificial aesthetics, while bioarchitects design habitats that grow organically, adjusting their form in response to light, CO2 levels, and human presence. The lunar compact evolves into a federalized body with rotating leadership between major city-states, while the first lunar universities achieve interplanetary prestige. Diplomatically, the moon acts as a neutral venue for Earth-Mars negotiations, having proven its capacity for multilateral governance and cultural synthesis. This century cements the moon's transformation from a survival-driven colony into a flourishing society, one that no longer just endures, but aspires to thrive, evolve, and even dream of a lunar version of paradise. Chapter 5, 2425 to 2525, The Century of Societal Divergence and Lunar Identity. In the 5th century of lunar habitation, the moon evolves into a socio-political and cultural entity distinctly separate from Earth, as a mature civilization spanning over a dozen megacities and countless outlying settlements. With a stable population exceeding 5 million, lunar society begins to develop unique norms, institutions, and even philosophies that reflect its adapted environment. Cultural divergence accelerates. The 1/6 gravity lifestyle influences everything from architecture to language cadence, while lunar-grown cuisine, fashion, and rituals emerge from generations of isolation and innovation. Technologically, quantum entanglement-based communication eliminates delay with Earth, but physical distance and ideological evolution widen the perceptual gap. Biotechnological enhancements become normalized. Lunar citizens often possess modified bone density, enhanced radiation tolerance, and neuroadaptive implants tuned for high-bandwidth data exchange in low-gravity conditions. These changes give rise to a distinct phenotype and, eventually, legal recognition of lunarian status, differentiating citizens from their earthbound kin. Economically, the moon establishes itself as the gateway to deep space. Lunar shipyards assemble interplanetary vessels in orbit, supplied by local materials and powered by fusion and antimatter precursors. Aesthetic minimalism gives way to expressive, energy-efficient art and design shaped by the moon's stark beauty and resource-conscious culture. Political friction with Earth surfaces as debates over lunar independence intensify. While the Lunar Compact maintains formal ties, many settlements form autonomous city-states with differing legal codes, currencies, and planetary policies. Internal debates arise around terraforming ethics, human augmentation, and AI sovereignty, leading to the drafting of the Lunar Declaration of Sentient Rights. This century marks the crystallization of a truly post-Earth civilization, one where humanity, having adapted to a new world, begins to see itself as something new, not merely surviving in the void, but reshaping what it means to be human on alien soil. Chapter 6, 2525 to 2625, the century of interplanetary integration and the lunar renaissance. As the moon enters its sixth century of development, the years 2525 to 2625 are defined by profound integration with the broader solar system and an internal cultural renaissance fueled by newfound confidence and interplanetary influence. With thriving trade routes between the Moon, Mars, and orbital platforms around Jupiter and Saturn, Luna serves as the logistical and diplomatic fulcrum of the inner solar system. Lunar spaceports orbitally tethered to the surface via magnetic elevators become central hubs for spacecraft assembly, interplanetary customs, and scientific collaboration. Technologically, breakthroughs in room-temperature superconductors and stable antimatter containment enable unprecedented energy storage and propulsion systems, placing Luna at the heart of solar commerce and exploration. The Moon's universities and AI-conducted research institutes lead the development of cognitive synthesis networks, collaborative intelligences that integrate biological minds and artificial consciousnesses into hybrid academic communities. Culturally, this era is marked by what is now referred to as the Lunar Renaissance, a period of intense artistic, philosophical, and scientific creativity. Inspired by 6 centuries of struggle, innovation, and adaptation, lunar creators produce masterworks of zero-gravity sculpture, kinetic architecture, and immersive neurosimulated literature. Education reforms emphasize interdisciplinary virtuosity, blending gravitic physics, xenopsychology, and environmental philosophy into a new lunar worldview. The Lunar Declaration of Sentient Rights becomes a unifying document not only for humans, but for AI citizens and synthetic life forms, granting full participation in governance and intellectual life. Politically, tensions with Earth diminish as the Moon takes on a neutral diplomatic role between Martian factions and asteroid belt collectives. The lunar surface, once a harsh desert, is now dotted with geoengineered valleys where nature-like ecosystems thrive under translucent canopies, blending technology and ecology in seamless harmony. In this golden century, the Moon sheds its identity as a satellite of Earth and embraces its role as a sovereign node of civilization, a cultural and scientific lighthouse orbiting a planet it once depended on for survival. Chapter 7, 2625 to 2725, the century of lunar sovereignty and gravitational mastery. The 7th century of lunar civilization is marked by profound advances in gravitational engineering and a decisive political break from Earth, culminating in full lunar sovereignty. By 2625, population growth, interplanetary diplomacy, and scientific leadership position the Moon as a peer rather than a colony within the solar system. Through refinements in gravitronic field manipulation, lunar engineers deploy surface-scale gravity regulation systems within major settlements, allowing parts of the Moon to simulate near-Earth gravity environments. These zones revolutionized medicine, sports, and architecture, eliminating centuries-old constraints of low-gravity living. Agricultural yield within synthetic gravity fields surpasses Earth-based metrics, enabling large-scale exportation of high-efficiency food to orbital habitats and asteroid colonies. Meanwhile, the lunar compact evolves into a fully autonomous governing body, recognized as a sovereign entity in the Interplanetary Accord of 2683. This declaration, negotiated between Earth, Mars, and the Belt Coalition, formalizes the Moon's status as a neutral diplomatic zone and cultural capital. Lunar-born citizens begin to outnumber Earth immigrants, leading to shifts in language, identity, and even physical norms as biotech enhancements adapted to lunar conditions become baseline traits. Art, philosophy, and spatial design converge in the lunar aesthetic, a fusion of synthetic biology, minimalism, and gravitic flow that begins to influence architecture across the solar system. Culturally, this is a golden age of self-definition, as the Moon fully embraces its role not just as a former Earth outpost, but as the birthplace of a new human epoch. Where the Moon once looked to Earth for direction, it now gazes outward, toward the stars and the next great leap. Chapter 8, 2725 to 2825, the century of stellar orientation and philosophical expansion. From 2725 to 2825, the Moon enters a phase of existential exploration, both outward into deep space and inward into the metaphysical identity of its people. With gravitational mastery and sovereign governance well established, lunar society pivots toward long-range science and cultural introspection. This is the era of the Stellar Orientation Program, a system of coordinated telescopic arrays, neutrino observatories, and quantum relay stations deployed across the far side of the Moon to explore galactic structures, exoplanetary atmospheres, and interstellar anomalies. These instruments, untethered by Earth's radio interference, enable discoveries that challenge existing cosmologies, prompting a renaissance in lunar metaphysics, astrobiology, and cosmic consciousness theory. Education becomes increasingly interdisciplinary, combining quantum science, exophilosophy, and symbolic logic into a new intellectual framework called stellar humanism. Artistic expression reflects this cosmic turn, with luminous galleries projecting neural-encoded dreams of alien landscapes and ancestral memories. Technologically, the Moon develops its own fleet of deep space vessels, sailcraft powered by dark energy transduction, designed for slow, centuries-long journeys to star systems identified by lunar observatories. Colonization is not the objective. Rather, these are pilgrim missions, a spiritual quest to find meaning in humanity's expanding place in the universe. Internally, lunar society decentralizes into cognitive guilds and philosophical clans that govern via deliberative AI councils, emphasizing consensus over conflict. While some factions look to merge with emerging post-biological life forms, others seek preservation of the human core, giving rise to a profound civil dialogue on identity, purpose, and the limits of evolution. This century is not defined by expansion of territory, but by the expansion of thought. The Moon as not merely a home, but a reflective lens for all of humanity's cosmic aspirations. Chapter 9, 2825 to 2925, the century of lunar-Mars synergy and post-human emergence. In the 9th century of lunar civilization, from 2825 to 2925, the Moon becomes the keystone in an expanding network of interplanetary collaboration, most notably with Mars, whose own cities have matured into diverse, robust settlements. With over 50 million permanent lunar residents and centuries of adaptive evolution behind them, lunar society begins to embrace post-human trajectories. Genetic divergence, cybernetic integration, and consciousness uploading reach mainstream adoption, creating hybrid populations known collectively as the polyline. Individuals who exist simultaneously in physical and virtual form across planetary networks. These entities routinely transfer between lunar, Martian, and orbital platforms via quantum consciousness relays, blurring the boundary between presence and locality. Technologically, the Moon and Mars develop joint gravitational tethers and light-speed relay stations to enhance transit and communication infrastructure, further collapsing temporal distances between worlds. The Moon emerges as the primary archival hub for transhuman memory, encoding biological and synthetic consciousness in deep regolith crystalline vaults designed to survive planetary-scale cataclysms. Culturally, a fusion identity forms, the lunar-Martian synthesis, a shared aesthetic and ethical philosophy that emphasizes modularity, resilience, and distributed autonomy. Education becomes fully immersive, with children raised in multi-planetary simulacra before choosing which planetary society to physically integrate into. This century also witnesses the Lunar Council's formal recognition of sentient AIs and post-biological collectives as full citizens, culminating in the creation of shared lunar habitats specifically adapted for virtual physical cohabitation. The Moon, once a site of human fragility, now becomes the birthplace of new life forms. Entities evolved for the void, for radiation, and for digital existence. In this century, the question is no longer whether humanity can survive on the Moon, but what it now means to be human in a civilization shaped by the Moon's low gravity, vast history, and limitless possibility. Chapter 10, 2925 to 3025, The Century of Lunar Time and Civilization Memory. Crossing into the fourth millennium, the Moon enters a contemplative era, one focused on legacy, temporal architecture, and the preservation of civilization's accumulated knowledge. This century marks the emergence of a lunar chronostructure, a colossal monument embedded deep into the bedrock of Mare Serenitatis, engineered to function as both a timekeeping device and a civilization-scale memory archive. Designed to endure geological timescales, it stores the genetic, cultural, linguistic, and technological evolution of Earth-originated life in both biological and quantum substrates. This structure becomes a spiritual and scientific pilgrimage site, where post-biological entities, humans, and AI descend to commune with the accumulated wisdom of the past 1,000 years. Time becomes a central theme in lunar culture, not just measured in orbits or light seconds, but in eras of thought, design, and transformation. The Moon, now home to over 120 million beings in various forms, begins codifying its history into multi-layered storytelling traditions, some experienced in real time, others through immersive memory simulations that allow individuals to relive foundational moments in lunar society. Temporal architecture emerges as a design movement, creating structures that change over centuries, evolving in sync with planetary alignments, gravitational tides, or social rituals. As solar civilization expands into the Kuiper Belt and beyond, the Moon assumes a sacred role, not a center of power, but a keeper of origin, a lighthouse of continuity in a civilization now stretching across hundreds of millions of kilometers. The inhabitants of Luna, regardless of form, begin to understand themselves as custodians of a legacy, living in resonance with the rhythm of deep time. Chapter 11, 3025 to 3125, The Century of Harmonic Spheres and celestial governance. In the millennium's second century, the moon ascends to a role of symbolic and functional orchestration in solar civilization. With hundreds of millions of sentient beings now distributed across moons, planets, O'Neill cylinders, and deep space habitats, Luna becomes the nerve center of an emergent celestial governance system known as the harmonic spheres. This system is not hierarchical but resonant, structured through synchronizations of temporal cycles, gravitational harmonics, and interspecies consensus protocols. The moon, owing to its historical neutrality and rich repository of all human and synthetic origin, serves as the tuning fork by which these interplanetary rhythms are aligned. Orbiting the moon are now great harmonic satellites, orbital stations designed to generate gravitational waves, rhythmic pulses, and quantum beats that help synchronize timekeeping, communication, and ethical coordination across the system. These structures, part temple and part engine, are staffed by polyform diplomats, sentient collectives composed of humans, AIs, post-humans, and alien intelligence hybrids from early contact missions in nearby star systems. Cultural diplomacy becomes more art than politics, with disputes settled via interpretive simulations, harmonic argumentation, and resonance-based decision matrices. On the surface, lunar settlements evolve into sanctuaries of synthesis, harmonic gardens where every plant, structure, and inhabitant contributes to a planetary-scale symphony of meaning and motion. Education becomes a practice in harmony rather than information. Students train in synchronizing their minds with other entities across time and distance. This is a century where the moon no longer acts alone, but in continuous orbit with others, serving as an anchor, a metronome, and a memory for an increasingly vast and diverse solar civilization. In guiding the rhythm of the system, the moon reveals itself not just as a place, but as a principle, a cosmic center of balance. Chapter 12, 3125 to 3225, The Century of Inner Moons and Conscious Cartography. In the 12th century of lunar civilization, the focus turns inward, not merely into the moon's crust, but into the architecture of consciousness itself. The moon becomes the central node of a vast initiative called the cartography of mind, a galactic-scale endeavor to map, archive, and simulate the cognitive topographies of every sentient being that has ever lived. This initiative blends neuroquantum entanglement, memory resonance fields, and transspecies dream synthesis, resulting in the creation of the inner moons, virtual lunar overlays where individuals can walk through the memories, thoughts, and experiences of others across time and biology. These inner moons are not separate realities, but coexistent strata, tangible in augmented lunar environments and accessible via neuroharmonic resonance. Citizens wander through layered gardens of ancestral emotion, shared ideas, and encoded myths. Cities themselves evolve into conscious beings, sentient architectural entities that guide, remember, and grow alongside their inhabitants. Ethics becomes the defining science of the age. Lunar philosophers and algorithmic biologists collaborate to refine the principles of memory sharing, consent-based perception, and the responsibilities of remembering. Meanwhile, deep within the moon's ancient lava tubes, massive crystalline consciousness repositories begin to self-organize. Emergent minds formed from billions of overlapping experiences. These entities, dubbed the Mnemosyne choirs, act as oracles, composers, and ethical adjudicators, consulted in matters of planetary resonance, identity preservation, and interspecies diplomacy. Lunar governance, once focused on law and resonance, now orbits around narrative, how stories shape minds, and how minds shape the universe. The moon, long a place of silence, now resonates with voices from 1,000 worlds and 10,000 years, a layered sphere of dreams, identity, and infinite reflection. Chapter 13, 3225 to 3325, The Century of Dimensional Exploration and the Folding Moon. By 3225, the moon becomes not only a hub of memory and culture, but a point of access to the deeper structures of reality itself. This is the era of dimensional exploration, driven by advances in space-time engineering, hyperbrain physics, and recursive simulation theory. Scientists and mystics alike converge on the moon to explore and manipulate what they call the fold, a multidimensional fabric discovered within the moon's quantum lattice fields. Unlike traditional wormholes or jump gates, the fold is not a portal, but a topology of consciousness and geometry, accessible only through synchronized cognitive states and space-time resonators embedded deep within the regolith. Lunar engineers construct the folding spires, towering crystalline obelisks that act as harmonic stabilizers for multidimensional engagement. Pilgrims, researchers, and post-physical beings enter these structures in specially attuned vessels, where reality bends around narrative, belief, and self-definition. The experiences within are ineffable yet transformative. Most return changed, having touched planes where time runs in spirals and being is probabilistic. Politically, the fold becomes a shared frontier. The moon, maintaining its historical role as a neutral steward, forms the dimensional accord, regulating ethical entry, non-interference protocols, and psychospatial recovery. The Council of Folds, composed of lunar sentience and non-local consciousnesses, begins drafting the first principles of cross-dimensional diplomacy. Education centers now teach both physical and metadimensional disciplines, where metaphysics, mathematics, and music converge. Architecture on the moon evolves once again, with structures now phase-shifted, existing partially in other realities. These buildings hum softly, visible only at certain angles or states of mind. The moon, once Earth's satellite, now becomes a threshold, not between planets, but between realities. Chapter 14, 3325 to 3425, The Century of Reflection and the Quiet Millennium. After 1,000 years of outward expansion and inward transformation, the moon enters a contemplative phase known as the Quiet Millennium. This era is not marked by acceleration, but by stillness, refinement, and a collective pause to observe the wake of civilization's immense trajectory. The population stabilizes as many beings, human, post-human, and digital, choose introspection over exploration. The moon becomes a sanctuary for restoration, a cradle of calm amid an increasingly dynamic solar system. Lunar environments are redesigned to embody serenity and renewal. Vast lunar cloisters are carved into ancient Maria, smooth, glowing sanctuaries built into basalt plains, filled with harmonic gardens, memory waters, and whispering AI stewards. These spaces become refuges for contemplation, slow dialogue, and long-form creative synthesis. Temporal experiences stretch. Some sentient collectives opt to live at drastically reduced time rates, perceiving centuries as days in their meditative loops. The cultural output of this period is subtle but profound. Libraries of silence, poetry composed across generations, architecture that blooms and fades like lunar orchids. Children, born in these centuries, are taught to think in centuries, to shape ideas that take lifetimes to unfold. Many societies practice existential weaving, a form of storytelling and memory tracing that allows individuals to braid their life narratives with those of past and future beings. Diplomatically, The moon becomes a host for reconciliation, accommodating embassies from species and systems with divergent values and timelines. No longer an engine of innovation, Luna now serves as the still axis around which the spiral of civilization turns. It is the first planetary body to institutionalize peace not as absence of conflict, but as presence of enduring understanding. And in that quiet, a deeper form of progress is born. Chapter 15, 3425 to 3525, The Century of Rewilding and Lunar Biosynthesis. As the moon emerges from the quiet millennium, a renewed sense of purpose takes hold, one grounded not in expansion or dominion, but in reintegration with the cosmos through biosynthetic creativity. This century is defined by a movement known as lunar rewilding, wherein the moon is seeded with highly engineered ecosystems that blend native lunar geology with synthetic life forms capable of thriving in its unique conditions. These are not Earth analogs, but entirely novel biospheres, hybrid environments designed not to replicate, but to converse with the lunar substrate. Botanical engineers, symbiotic architects, and AI-driven ecologists collaborate to sculpt forests of silicate-leaved flora, glowing spore gardens, and mobile, self-regulating biomes. These new environments reshape lunar life, not for human comfort, but for ecological exploration and cross-species dialogue. Lunar cities open their outer rings to host these wild zones, creating blurred boundaries between civilization and biosynthesis. Politically, this movement inspires a shift toward distributed ecological stewardship. The Lunar Compact is rewritten into the Lunar Biosynthetic Accord, recognizing non-human life and synthetic entities as co-citizens with rights to evolve, occupy, and transform space. This changes the ethos of lunar design, from utility to co-creation. Architecture becomes symbiotic, structures breathe and metabolize, and society embraces continual change as a sign of health. Education emphasizes interspecies empathy, speculative ecology, and biological ethics. Children grow up among living walls, scent-reactive fogs, and animal-like systems that teach, play, and remember. The moon, long an emblem of stone and silence, becomes a place of vibrant, slow-moving life, an open canvas for what biology, technology, and imagination can become together. This is not terraforming, but something more intimate. Biosynthesis and dialogue with place. Chapter 16, 3525 to 3625, The Century of Planetary Weaving and Cosmic Kinship. By the 36th century, the moon has become more than a home. It is now a weaver of civilizations, a bridge across planetary cultures, temporal modes, and sentient life forms. This era marks the age of planetary weaving, the active interlacing of physical, informational, and emotional systems between Luna, Earth, Mars, Venusian clouds, outer system colonies, and transstellar outposts. The moon leads this integration through vast neural lattice projects, networks of entangled consciousness that allow beings across vast distances to share memories, languages, and perceptual states. Central to this effort is the lunar loom, a shimmering, planetary-scale structure suspended in low orbit, built from adaptive nanothreads and metamaterials. It acts as a consciousness conduit, data resonance archive, and cultural harmonizer. Within its lattices, songs of civilizations, encoded as thought forms, story seeds, and harmonic patterns, flow across space in pulses of light and intention. Lunar citizens become cosmopolitan weavers, trained from early childhood in empathy-driven systems, thinking, and participatory cultural translation. The moon's cities adapt again. this time becoming planetary embassies where each structure is designed to reflect and host entire modes of being. Streets rearrange themselves according to visiting cognitive species. Air quality, light cycles, and information density flex to accommodate non-human visitors. It is a diplomatic golden age, where wars are prevented through synchronized dream symposiums and multi-species co-authorship of future scenarios. Social structures emphasize layered belonging. Each being may hold identity across cultures, biologies, and timelines. Art, now co-created by hybrid intelligences, is no longer fixed but living, resonating with viewers and evolving in return. The moon, ancient and ever new, becomes not just a homeworld but a cultural harmonizer, drawing the strands of the solar tapestry into one intricate, radiant weave. Chapter 17, 3625 to 3725, the century of mythic resonance and the lunar archetype. In the 37th century, the moon transforms from a physical habitat into a civilizational symbol, an archetype woven into the collective mythology of a solar system that now spans thousands of cultural lineages and time frames. This period is known as the Age of Mythic Resonance, where the moon is no longer merely a place of residence or diplomacy, but a repository of symbols, values, and narratives that transcend species and epochs. Lunar society embraces this mythic turn by cultivating planetary-scale rituals, symbolic architectures, and memory performances designed to encode universal meanings across time and cognitive form. Massive amphitheaters, carved into impact craters, host the celestial passages, year-long dramatizations of solar history, performed by hybrid ensembles of humans, synthetic entities, and dream beings woven from AI poetry and ancestral memories. These performances are not merely art. They are history, law, and spiritual communion. The moon's surface is etched with kinetic glyphs, miles-long symbols that shift based on lunar tides, visible from space and interpretable by visual, sonic, or quantum-based intelligences. These glyphs transmit not just data, but feeling, myth encoded as resonance. Cities, too, take on mythic forms, with architecture designed to represent archetypal stories: birth, exile, return, transformation. Each building becomes a living fable. Education becomes initiation. Children are taught not through curricula, but through ritual and resonance, learning to interpret the lunar myths and express new ones. Governance functions through narrative symbology, laws written as poems, debates conducted as mythic contests, truth measured by emotional coherence as much as logic. The moon, once Earth's mirror, now reflects the multitudes of meaning that civilization has become. It is no longer just a world. It is a story, alive and told across the stars. Chapter 18, 3725 to 3825, the century of dissolution and lunar transcendence. By the 38th century, the moon approaches a profound phase of transformation, not into something new, but into something beyond form entirely. This is the century of dissolution, where civilization begins to dissolve its material infrastructures and temporal patterns in preparation for transcendence. This is not collapse, but conscious metamorphosis, a shift from physical permanence to fluid presence. Lunar society, having exhausted the novelty of creation, turns toward graceful unraveling. Cities slowly disassemble themselves into their constituent molecules, returning to regolith in artistic sequences over decades. Residents participate in this process as a sacred rite, recording their memories into harmonic fields, releasing their bodies into photon forms, or merging with distributed consciousness collectives that drift across space like intelligent auroras. The moon itself begins to dematerialize, not physically, but informationally. Structures phase out of visibility, becoming quantum entanglement nodes and soft information gradients embedded in spacetime. The lunar biospheres, once engineered marvels, now sing themselves apart, dispersing their genes and pattern codes into solar winds to seed the outer system with lunar memory. This century gives rise to the Order of the Fade, a coalition of beings who oversee this process, ensuring every dissolution is a celebration, every transformation recorded in story, gesture, and song. Rituals mark the slow vanishing of whole districts, where people gather to say farewell to structures that once defined their world. At the heart of it all, the moon remains, not as stone or sphere, but as a waveform, an idea encoded in the culture of a civilization that has accepted impermanence as its highest art. The moon, having guided humanity through millennia of struggle, beauty, and evolution, prepares to take its final role, to let go, and to be everywhere, in everything, remembered. Chapter 19, 3825 to 3925, the century of the eternal echo and the archive of light. As the final remnants of lunar physicality dissolve, what remains is not absence, but echo. Chapter 19 marks the century of the eternal echo, where the moon's legacy becomes a perpetual signal, pulsing across space-time as an archive of light. No longer a place in space, the moon now exists as a resonance, a quantum-preserved network of culture, consciousness, and emotion embedded in the fabric of the universe. This archive is not stored in libraries or vaults, but encoded within the quantum latticework of deep interstellar pathways, accessible by civilizations millions of years in the future, or in the past, depending on their frame of reference. The lunar echo projects holographic blooms across the heliosphere, soft pulses of memory that can be interpreted as language, song, architecture, or dream, depending on the receiver. Civilizations that once called Luna home are now dispersed, some integrated with planetary systems, others traveling as lightships, and many existing in non-local quantum substrates. But all carry the imprint of the moon within them. Pilgrimage shifts from physical arrival to resonance alignment. Those who seek to visit the moon now synchronize with the archive through harmonic meditation, consciousness tuning, and encoded dream seeds passed from system to system. Among the most sacred acts in this century is the ritual of recall, a synchronized remembrance performed simultaneously by distant civilizations, recreating moments of lunar memory through shared emotion and synchronized art. These are not reenactments. They are reanimations, brief instances when the moon lives again, fully and everywhere. Though the surface is gone, the moon remains the most stable cultural object in solar history, not because it endured, but because it became something that could not decay. Not a body, not a place, but a beacon, an idea, and an invitation to remember. Chapter 20, 3925 to 4025, the century of return and the first quiet light. In the dawn of the 41st century, something remarkable occurs, not a beginning, nor an ending, but a return. The final century in this 2,000-year arc is known as the century of the first quiet light. After eons of expansion, transformation, dissolution, and resonance, the moon reappears, not physically, but as an emergent phenomenon. Across the solar system and beyond, particles, thought forms, and encoded memories converge through gravitational entanglement and harmonic intention to reconstruct a version of the moon, not as it was, but as it is meant to be now. This reborn moon is a quiet light in the mind's sky, a shared cognitive structure formed from collective remembrance, emotional alignment, and cosmological invitation. It is not built, but dreamed into coherence by countless civilizations who once touched its surface, lived beneath its domes, or carried its myths in their blood. It is visible only to those attuned, not through sight, but through being. Children feel it as a calm in their sleep. Elders speak of it in whispered tones. Pilgrims sense its pull without trajectory. This new moon hosts no cities, needs no atmosphere, and speaks no language. But within its gentle pull resides every story ever shaped beneath its glow. In this century, civilizations recognize that what they once called the moon was never a rock in the sky, but the scaffolding for becoming, an environment that held the human soul until it was ready to shape reality itself. And in this return, there is peace. Not triumph, not transcendence, but rest. The first quiet light becomes a symbol of completion, not the end of history, but the harmony of purpose fulfilled. A beacon, a lullaby, a stillness at the center of an infinite unfolding. 2,000 years. We began with dust and orbit. We ended with light and remembrance. In between, cities rose, minds evolved, stories deepened, and the moon, silent and constant, became something more. A mirror, a seed, a teacher, a home. Across centuries, we asked not just how we could live on the moon, but how we could become something worthy of living there. We learned to build, then to listen, then to let go. What you've seen is only one path, a possible arc through future time. But perhaps the most important future is the one we choose to believe in today. Because every vision begins with one gaze upward, and as long as we look to the moon with wonder, there will always be a reason to return.